Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. We all want to live long lives, but even more than that, we want those years to be healthy and vibrant. Today we're going deep into the connection between the foods we eat over many years and how well we age. What does it really take to thrive as we get older? That's what we're exploring today, focusing on how our diets impact things like staying sharp mentally, keeping our bodies strong, and maintaining good mental health. And hey, if you're finding this deep dive interesting so far, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want more content like this.
It's such a fundamental question, isn't it? How to not just add years to our lives, but add life to those years. And what makes this deep dive so fascinating is the sheer scale of the research we're looking at. A study that followed a huge number of people, we're talking over 100,000, for up to 3 decades. That's the kind of long-term data that really helps us understand these connections.
It's incredible data. This study, which was published in Nature Medicine, tapped into 2 really well-known projects. The Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. Both of these studies started way back in 1986.
Wow, 1986, that's a long time.
It is, and that's what makes this research so valuable. The researchers were looking at how sticking to different eating patterns over all those years and the role of those ultra-processed foods, the ones, related to something they defined as healthy aging.
And that definition is really key here because it's not just about living a long time.
Exactly. It's about more than just longevity. They had a very specific, holistic definition of healthy aging. For this study, it meant reaching at least age 70 without any of 11 major chronic diseases. But they didn't stop there. Participants also had to have good cognitive function, still thinking clearly. They had to maintain their physical abilities, meaning they could move around well, and they had to report good mental health. It's really a much broader picture of aging well.
It's about really living those extra years to the fullest, not just surviving them. And what's really exciting is that the study actually pinpointed several dietary patterns that were linked to greater odds of achieving this type of healthy aging.
So not just one right way to eat.
Exactly. They looked at 8 different well-respected dietary approaches and how closely people followed them over time.
Okay, that's interesting. So 8 different ways of eating. Can you give us a rundown of what those were?
Absolutely. They looked at the Alternative Healthy Eating Index. We'll call that AHEI for short. Then there was the Alternative Mediterranean Index, or AMED, and of course the DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. Then there's MIND, which is short for Mediterranean-Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. Quite a mouthful.
Lots of acronyms to remember, but keep going.
Right. Then we have a Healthful Plant-Based Diet, or HPDI, the Planetary Health Diet Index, or PHDI. They also looked at an empirically inflammatory dietary pattern, EDP, basically a diet that's linked to inflammation. And finally, an empirical dietary index for hyperinsulinemia, or EDIH, a dietary pattern linked to high insulin levels.
Wow, that's quite the lineup. And what's amazing is the study found that following any of those 8 dietary patterns consistently over time was linked to better chances of healthy aging. That's a pretty big takeaway in itself.
It really is. It shows that there are many paths to healthy aging, but of course some paths seem to be a bit more effective than others.
Okay, so which of these eating patterns really stood out from the crowd?
Well, the AHEI, that Alternative Healthy Eating Index, showed the strongest overall association with healthy aging. People who really stuck with it over time had almost twice the odds, 1.86 times higher to be exact, of aging healthily compared to those who didn't follow it closely. And here's the kicker. When they raised the bar for healthy aging to age 75, the AHEI's benefits became even more pronounced, boosting the odds to 2.24 times higher.
Wow, almost 2.5 times higher. That's significant.
Yeah.
So following a pattern like the AHEI really seems to pay off as we age, especially as we get into our mid-70s and beyond. And this wasn't just about avoiding illness, was it?
No, it was about thriving. The AHEI was also most strongly linked to maintaining good physical function and mental health later in life. It really speaks to the idea that these dietary patterns are about quality of life, not just quantity.
That's fantastic. So what about some of the other patterns? Did any others show particularly strong connections with certain aspects of healthy aging?
Yes, definitely. The Planetary Health Diet Index, or PHDI, had a strong association with maintaining good cognitive health and surviving to age 70. What's interesting about the PHDI is that it considers the environmental impact of food choices, which is definitely something to think about.
Right. Sustainability is becoming more and more important.
Absolutely. And then there was the Reversed Empirical Dietary Index for Hyperinsulinemia, or REDIH, which focuses on keeping insulin levels stable. This one showed the strongest association with being free of those 11 major chronic diseases.
So different patterns, different strengths. What about the healthful plant-based diet, the HPDI? Did that one show as much of an impact?
Well, the HPDI, while still likely beneficial, had the weakest association with overall healthy aging and some of those individual components. So maybe a strictly plant-based approach isn't as beneficial for overall healthy aging, at least according to this study.
Interesting. Okay, so we've seen some patterns have a bigger impact than others. Now let's get specific. What were some of the key foods that were linked to healthier aging? What should we be eating more of?
There were some really consistent themes across all the beneficial dietary patterns. Higher intakes of fruits, especially berries and tomatoes, those were strong performers. And vegetables, particularly leafy greens and those dark yellow veggies.
Like spinach and sweet potatoes.
Exactly. Whole grains were also important. And then, of course, those good unsaturated fats, nuts, legumes like beans and lentils, and even low-fat dairy products all contributed to a higher likelihood of healthy aging.
That really aligns with what we often hear about healthy eating in general. But it's really compelling to see it so clearly linked to healthy aging in a long-term study like this. What about foods we should try to avoid? Were there any that stood out?
There were, unfortunately, higher intakes of trans fats, sodium, those were big ones. Total meats in general, and especially red and processed meats, were associated with lower chances of healthy aging. Interestingly, the study also found that adding unsaturated fats like olive oil and the fats found in avocados and nuts was particularly beneficial, especially for surviving to 70 and maintaining good physical and cognitive function. It's a reminder that not all fats are bad.
That's so important. We need to make sure we're including those healthy fats. So this study included both men and women. Did the researchers notice any differences in how these dietary patterns affected different groups of people?
Yes, they did. While all 8 patterns were good for both men and women, the links were generally stronger for women. They also saw stronger associations in certain subgroups, like people who smoked, individuals with a BMI over 25, and those who weren't as physically active. This suggests that diet might be especially important for these folks.
Right, so even if you have other things going on, improving your diet can still make a big difference. The study also looked at something that's getting a lot of attention these days, ultra-processed foods. What did they find there?
The findings on ultra-processed foods were pretty alarming. Higher consumption of these foods was linked to a whopping 32% lower chance of healthy aging. And it wasn't just one area. This negative association was seen across all the individual domains of healthy aging. Cognitive, physical, and mental health, even the risk of chronic diseases and surviving to age 70 all took a hit. The message is pretty clear. Too much ultra-processed food really undermines your chances of healthy aging.
That's a big deal. It really highlights the need to focus on those whole, minimally processed foods for long-term health and well-being. Now, earlier you mentioned that these 8 dietary patterns, while they share some common ground, also have their own unique focuses. Can you unpack that a little more?
Of course. While they all emphasize more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and less red and processed meat, they do have their own special touches. For example, the AME, like the traditional Mediterranean diet, is all about olive oil, fish, and nuts. The MIND diet, which builds upon the Mediterranean approach, zeroes in on the benefits of berries and leafy greens for cognitive health. The D-H diet is all about keeping sodium low to help manage blood pressure. The PHDI takes a broader approach, looking at both health and the environmental sustainability of food choices, really emphasizing those plant-based proteins. And the HPDI, as the name suggests, really champions healthy plant-based foods while keeping animal products to a minimum.
It's like a buffet of healthy choices. Each approach has its own strengths, and they all seem to contribute to healthy aging in their own ways. So these findings, they're not just a one-off, are they? Have other studies seen similar results?
Not at all. The researchers pointed out that their findings actually echo what's been seen in other studies around the world. Studies in France, Australia, China, Israel, they've all shown that Mediterranean-style diets and other healthy eating patterns are linked to healthy aging. It's pretty consistent.
That really adds to the strength of the evidence. Now, as with any research study, there are always limitations. What were some of the things the researchers themselves acknowledged?
They pointed out that they relied on people self-reporting what they ate, which isn't always perfect. People might not remember everything accurately. And the study participants were mostly health professionals, so they might be more health conscious than the average person. This means the findings might not apply to everyone equally. However, the massive size of this study and the long follow-up, up to 30 years, really lend a lot of weight to their findings.
That's good to know. So if we had to sum it all up for our listeners, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from this deep dive into the research?
The biggest takeaway is that the food choices we make over the long haul have a really, really significant impact on our chances of aging healthily. It's not just about dodging certain diseases, it's about setting ourselves up to truly thrive as we get older, to stay sharp mentally, keep our bodies strong, and maintain good mental health. The foods we eat today can lay the groundwork for a healthier future.
That's so powerful. Food really is more than just fuel. It's an investment in our future selves. And it sounds like this study really backs up the idea that a diet rich in plant-based foods with moderate amounts of healthy animal products and limited ultra-processed foods is the way to go.
Absolutely. Focusing on those whole, minimally processed foods seems to be a key theme across all of the beneficial dietary patterns.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. It's given us so much to think about. So for all of you listening, think about this connection between diet and healthy aging. What are some small changes you can start making today to invest in your future well-being? It's definitely something to chew on.
It is, and remember, even small changes, when you do them consistently, can make a big difference over time.
So true. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. It's been a pleasure exploring this important research. And as always, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want more content like this.